Sticking with Yorktown, the small town is supposedly home to something far worse than ghosts. According to eyewitnesses, many of whom have posted their experiences online for all to see, Yorktown is home to the dreaded Wendigo. More often associated with the frigid woods of the far north, the Wendigo is a beast taken from Algonquian folklore. Tales of the Wendigo include stories of the creature as a massive, Bigfoot-like snow beast to a skinwalker that drives people to murder. Some Wendigos even possess the bodies of those who froze to death during lonely hikes in snow-covered mountains. The only consistency in the Wendigo tales is that the creature is always described as ravenous for blood. Texas does not get as cold as Minnesota or Manitoba, but, according to Texas resident Isel Vargas, a bald and black-eyed Wendigo roams Yorktown on misty nights. Scarier still, the Wendigo of Texas is just one of the many skinwalkers that apparently calls Texas home. As for the Yorktown Wendigo, there is a Reddit page dedicated to exploring more stories about the town's resident pale monstrosity. "1979 was a boom year for oil in Houston. The biggest city in the state, Houston got a lot bigger in the late 1970s thanks to American migrants who came from all over in order to get rich quick in East Texas. A few of these migrants met something other than good luck in Houston. In just 2 months in 1979, 5 people were murdered by a killer who took pleasure in decapitation. 40 years later, the killer remains uncaught, and Houston cold case investigators don't have a single fingerprint to help them. The first to die was Alice Elaine Rankin. On July 27, 1979, Bob Smith, one of Rankin's co-workers, showed up at the Orchard Apartments located in the 5900 block of Glenmont in the Gulfton neighborhood of southwest Houston. He was there to give Rankin a ride to work. Smith, noticing that the 33-year-old Rankin wasn't outside to meet him, went up to her apartment. Inside, Smith found Rankin in her bed. She was naked and dead. Her killer had tied her feet to the bed, while he had placed a pillow on her upper body. Smith removed the pillow and found that Rankin was missing her head. Homicide detectives would later add that Rankin had been sexually assaulted. 2 weeks after the discovery of Rankin's corpse, another body was found. This one belonged to Mary Michael Calcutta, a new Houston resident originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The 25-year-old woman was found dead in her bathroom. There were differences between the Rankin and Calcutta crime scenes. Namely, Calcutta was found fully clothed and had her throat slit. Calcutta had also fought her killer tooth and nail, which was obvious by the fact that Calcutta's body was riddled with defensive wounds. However, investigators could not overlook the fact that Calcutta's apartment was located only 2 floors above Rankin's. Calcutta had also been sexually assaulted. Amazingly, this was not the only weird thing about this case. On the same day that Calcutta's corpse was found, an exterminator found the body of 26-year-old Doris Lynn Threadgill inside of a townhouse in northwestern Houston. Threadgill's killer had cut her throat so bad that she had been virtually decapitated. The next body found belonged to 16-year-old Joan Huffman, who was found dead inside of Watonga Park on October 4, 1979. On the same day, at a used car lot, the body of 18-year-old Robert Spangenberger was found inside the trunk of a white Dodge car. Spangenberger's head had been removed. Houston investigators are not uniform in their opinions about these crimes. Some argue that it was all the work of one madman. Besides the Orchard Apartments connection between Rankin and Calcutta, Huffman's body was found 4 miles away from the Threadgill crime scene. Eyewitnesses also heard screams and gunshots near Threadgill's house on the night before both Huffman and Spangenberger were found. Other homicide investigators discount the single killer theory, arguing that Rankin and Calcutta were killed by the same person, but Huffman and Spangenberger were killed by different people. Some even argue that Threadgill's murder is unconnected to the other 4. The 1980s were the decade of Reaganomics, Margaret Thatcher, popular excess, cocaine, and heavy metal. The 1980s were also the age of the Satanic Panic, a protracted hysteria that blamed everything from MTV to Dungeons and Dragons for the supposed upsurge in satanic crimes. The good people of Texas were not immune to this virus. Truth be told, one of the most infamous examples of the Satanic Panic occurred in the small town of Childress between 1988 and 1991. One evening, not long after the sun had set over the western horizon, a terrible discovery was made. Tate Rowland, a local teenager, was found hanging from a tree. The sheriff's department interviewed everyone in the Rowland family, and to a person they said that Tate was not suicidal. However, the one eyewitness in the case contradicted this, saying that he saw Tate hang himself. The death was ruled a suicide. That's about where things stood until May 1991, when 27-year-old Terry Trosper, Tate's older sister, was found dead in her own bed. 2 deaths anywhere is alarming, but when it happens in the same family in a town of just 5,800 people, it cannot be a coincidence, right? According to the science, that is exactly what the deaths were, a tragic coincidence. Despite family assertions to the contrary, investigators learned that Tate's death was a suicide caused by a recent breakup with his girlfriend. As for Terry, an autopsy found that she had died after choking on her own vomit. Terry's blood also showed high levels of the drug Elavil, which is most often used to treat anxiety and major depressive disorder. These official findings were not made public in time to stop a panic. The rumor mill of Childress went to work even before Tate Rowland was buried. Reports flooded into the police saying that strange and unknown people attended Tate's funeral, including one young male who chanted the word "suicide" throughout the service. This rumor ran in conjunction with several police reports filed in November 1988, which claimed that a truck carrying unidentified persons was seen trying to pick up children from local schools. Some even said that Tate himself was a member of a satanic cult. There were even reports of people in black robes hanging out in abandoned buildings. One report went so far as to say a local teenager was seen eating the Bible. Things took a very strange turn when Darwin Wilkes, a friend of Terry's, tried to commit suicide by swallowing between 25 and 30 tablets of Elavil. His suicide note read, "I know something that the cops don't know. I know who killed Terry. I can't live anymore." A new autopsy on Tate Rowland's body discovered that he too had taken Elavil before his death. Even more shocking were the findings of the second autopsy on Terry, which found that she had contusions on her inner thighs and in her mouth. These wounds indicated that Terry had been assaulted by at least 2 men prior to her death. In the wake of these findings, the legendary Texas Rangers put out a pamphlet outlining what to look for in ritual murder cases. Although Tate Rowland is still considered a suicide, and even though no murder charges were ever brought in the case of Terry Trosper, many people down in Childress think that dark forces were at play back in those days. Beginning in late 1990, sex workers in Dallas began dying at an alarming rate. It was obvious that someone was doing the killing, and that someone was a seriously sick individual. The killer signed all of his handiwork with his gruesome calling card, the removal of victims' eyes. The man later known as the Eyeball Killer was born Charles Frederick Albright in Amarillo, Texas in the Depression year of 1933. Adopted by the Albright family a few weeks after his birth, young Charles grew up in a comfortable, middle-class life. But, underneath the surface, there was trouble brewing. Dell Albright, Charles's mother, believed in harsh discipline. When Charles misbehaved, Dell would tie him to the bed. There were also times when Dell got pleasure out of making Charles wear girls' clothing. When Charles was 11, Dell enrolled him in a taxidermy class. Charles took to taxidermy like a natural, and before long he was skinning and stuffing dead birds. The only problem was that Dell would not pay for fake eyes for the dead animals, so Charles was told to use buttons instead. Charles was an intelligent boy, but prone to mischief. At age 15 in 1948, he contracted crabs after sleeping with a local sex worker. A year later, he stole $380 from a cash register. 2 years later, Charles was sent to jail for the first time after he was convicted of theft and receiving stolen property. Charles would be in and out of trouble for the rest of his life. In 1951 he broke into the Arkansas State Teachers College and stole nude pictures from a female dormitory. On one of these pictures Charles glued the eyes that he had cut out of a picture of a friend's ex-girlfriend. Charles continued to steal, got married to a woman named Betty Nestor, and, in 1981, was accused of molesting a 9-year-old girl. 4 years later, Charles admitted to molesting the preteen daughter of a church friend. He received probation. The first of the Eyeball Killer murders was discovered on December 13, 1990. The corpse belonged to 33-year-old prostitute Mary Lou Pratt. She had been found partially nude in a field. Albright had sexually assaulted Pratt before shooting her execution style in the back of the head. The autopsy found that Pratt's killer had removed her eyeballs with surgical skill. 2 months after this homicide, 27-year-old sex worker Susan Peterson was found dead about a mile away from the Pratt crime scene. She too had had her eyeballs removed. A third prostitute was discovered on March 19, 1981. This victim, 45-year-old Shirley Williams, was found not far from an elementary school. Williams had been shot in the head like the others, and the cuts on her face indicated that her eyeballs had been removed with an X-Acto knife. Dallas now had a serial killer on its hands. It also had a major breakthrough in the form of eyewitness Veronica Rodriguez. Rodriguez, 26, was a known prostitute and drug addict. Therefore, few believed her when she said that she had seen Pratt's murder. In fact, Rodriguez had been involved in a threesome with Pratt and her killer on the night of homicide. After the John had struck her in the head with a gun, Rodriguez had sought shelter in the nearby home of a truck driver named Axton Schindler. No clues were found in Schindler's house, but investigators did learn that Schindler's landlord was a 57-year-old high school science teacher and carpenter named Charles Albright. Albright owned other properties, two of which was very close to the three crime scenes. A sheriff's deputy recalled that Charles Albright's name had come up on a tip line. A caller had told the deputy that Albright had once dated Pratt. The caller also said that Albright had an unhealthy fascination with eyes and owned a large collection of X-Acto knives. Charles Albright was arrested on March 22, 1991. Police found in his home not only several X-Acto blades, but books on serial killers and a copy of Gray's Anatomy. While the murder weapons and missing eyeballs were never found, hair fibers found in Albright's truck linked him to all three murders. However, Albright was only convicted of the murder of Shirley Williams. Today he is still behind bars in Lubbock, Texas, counting down the endless days of a life sentence. It all started in July 1969. Across from Greer Island, on the north side of Texas's Lake Worth, a crowd of startled spectators saw a creature that was neither a goat nor a man. In fact, as they claimed, the creature was a fishy goatman. One member of the crowd had enough of their wits left to snap a photo of the monster. They captured a furry, hazy, and large white thing standing tall among the weeds. Later known simply as the Lake Worth goatman, this strange cryptid is not America's only half-goat monstrosity, but it may well be its most documented. After first appearing in an article in the Star-Telegram newspaper, the goatman quickly became a local celebrity, with area residents investing in traps and bullets in order to capture or kill the creature. Goatman hunters are so numerous that the website for the Tarrant County Historical Journal felt it necessary to post a warning about going after Greer Island's most famous resident. While written off as a hoax, the goatman, which eyewitnesses claimed jumped on parked cars and grabbed at least one female on the night of July 9, 1969, was the center of several police reports for 2 months. Similarly, one of the cars attacked by the monster was found to have an 18-inch gash on one of its side doors. Local police investigated, but came up empty. Several decades later, in 2005, a reporter for the Star-Telegram received a letter lacking a name and forwarding address. The bizarre letter offered a confession. The writer said that they were once a student at Northside High School, and on July 9, 1969, they went out to Lake Worth wearing a mask. They did it just to scare their classmates. This letter has never been verified, but it is more than likely true that the goatman was some dumb teenager in a fursuit. But, on the off chance that a half-man, half-goat roams Lake Worth, it would be a good idea to visit the location with a camera and a well-oiled hunting rifle. When a child goes missing or is abducted in the United States, the nationwide Amber Alert system is activated. This system inundates local news networks and cell phones with information about the missing child and any potential suspects. As with most pieces of legislation, the Amber Alert system was born out of a horrific tragedy. On January 13, 1996, 9-year-old Amber Hagerman of Arlington, Texas was entertaining herself by riding her bike in the parking lot of an abandoned grocery store. Amber's lazy afternoon was interrupted by a man in a black pickup truck, who snatched up the little girl and threw her in the cab. The only eyewitness, Jimmy Keville, called the local police, who in turn began searching for Amber alongside 50 other municipal, state, and federal officers. Sadly, all of these searchers could not find Amber in time. 5 days after her abduction, a passerby found Amber's corpse in a creek 4 miles away from the abandoned grocery store. Amber's killer had snuffed out her life by cutting her throat in half. The fact that Amber was found naked and bruised confirmed that Amber's killer had been motivated by lust. As the weeks wore on, Texas authorities and the FBI told the press about some of their pet theories. They believed that the killing was a spur-of-the-moment act. They also suggested that some personal misfortune, such as a breakup or a loss of employment, had driven the killer to lash out at the little girl. More concrete help in the Amber Hagerman case came in 1997, when the Dallas Amber Plan was created. The plan would later become Amber Alert System in 2000. Amber Hagerman's name is known, but her killer remains as elusive as ever. The murder of Amber Hagerman is arguably Texas's biggest cold case.